Hi, everybody. I am Nick, the founder of Friday Pulse, and I'd like to welcome us to our monthly webinar. And I'd like you to meet Roy uh, Baez. I've asked you just before we started, and then you said Joan Baez, so it's Roy Baez. I've known Roy for a long time, but I realised that before today, I've never had to pronounce his surname. So I suddenly thought, how do I do it? But Joan Baez, Roy Baez, and we're going to talk about the long game of happiness and about how you can build with consistency and persistency happiness into your teams in your organization. And uh, Roy is, I think you've been involved with Friday Pulse since you joined ProSearch, didn't you? So
Yeah, since 2017. Yep.
yeah. So perhaps you'd like to introduce yourself and ProSearch just a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Nick. And thank you for this opportunity to have a conversation with you about how Friday Pulse has assisted ProSearch and positively impacted us over the years. As you mentioned, I'm Roy Baez. I am the manager of organizational development at ProSearch. ProSearch is a global e-discovery company we're a hybrid company, but we do have offices in Los Angeles, Hyderabad, India, and Dublin, Ireland. Um, like I said, about 8 years, and I've got about just under 20 years in training development and organizational development. So I was thrilled to be introduced to Friday in 2017, and it's been a fantastic relationship ever since.
Yeah, and you of course still call us Friday because we had a
Yes,
trademark dispute. So we're Friday Pulse now, but we
Friday
started off
Pulse.
Friday Pulse very ambitiously calling ourselves Friday because I thought, oh well, Monday, Monday.com have when we want to be Friday, but it actually became quite difficult as a name because for search engines, just putting in Friday, you don't get anywhere near us, whereas Friday Pulse you get straight to us. So in the end, I think it was a blessing, but it was but yeah, so when I think we started work with ProSearch just probably 9 months before you joined, and you took over the use of it, didn't you?
Yeah, it was February 2016 when the relationship between ProSearch and Friday Pulse
Yeah.
began. And, so we had it for about a year before I joined. Actually, I take it back, it was April of
Yeah.
2016. So it was almost a year when I joined, when I assumed ownership of the tool, the program, the relationship, and the analysis. And that's when it happened.
Yeah. And you were what about 150, 160 people then? And now you're yeah.
Yeah, actually, I remember when I started, there was 152, and I think we will hire our 253rd employee and 254th employee. We have two people starting next week. So
Yeah. Yeah. So it's been a actually in a way like your Friday Pulse figures, it's been a slow, not a slow, but a consistent, persistent growth of the company, hasn't it? And I know the company's changed, and you weren't hybrid when we started, were you? Everything was based in LA.
yeah, absolutely, 100%. This was we even called it, our home office. And, there were those 100 plus people were on a couple of floors in this building. And then certainly we know everything changed over the last few years, and we became a hybrid company in March of 2020, which like a lot of us did,
Yeah.
and we have been that way ever since.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so you started using Friday Pulse, so for anyone that doesn't know, Friday Pulse measures the happiness and the drivers of happiness. We call it both a happiness and a culture tool. So we basically measure the culture of organizations through something called a culture profile, and we also measure very regularly happiness of the teams. And actually, ProSearch joined us as a client when we were on a platform which we used to call Mood Map, and it was it was a monthly tool, I think, when you started, and then switched into the weekly tool when we launched that, probably the back end of 2018, 2019. You're probably one of the first people onto the weekly. I actually can't remember precisely when you moved. Um, but it's there to help organizations understand what's going on in the organization now. But of course, to build. I mean, it's all very well measuring team happiness, but the whole point is to build happy and successful teams. I always talk about the fact that teams need to be happy and successful. If they're just successful and not happy, you're going to drive people out of the business. And if you're happy and not successful, you're going to go out of business. So you need the two things together really to go there. So and ProSearch have been brilliant at really using it. So I mean, if you go back, cast your mind back to today minus 8 years, whatever it is, 7 years since you started it. What was your first impression when you started looking at the Friday Pulse scores? Not, I don't mean about Friday Pulse, but about the organization and what needed to happen. Yeah.
Well, it was fascinating because one of the things that struck me immediately was what a radical concept it was, specifically for our industry. We're at the intersection of technology and legal services, and so it was fascinating that this company was concerned about employee happiness, and authentically concerned, and so much so that we just didn't want to rely on what we felt or what we heard. We wanted to actually hear from the employees, and so it was interesting. I mean, when we kicked it off, looking at those scores, I think we were going into it feeling good and expecting, oh, there's going to be 5 stars and the highest ratings ever, because we're killing it every single day. And there were some surprises, and that immediately proved the value of what Friday could provide us, because what we may think or feel may not be authentic. And when people can provide information anonymously, they're going to be honest. And what's better than that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's quite possible for some people to use these sort of employee listening tools and get a very false picture, because if there isn't the sort of psychological safety and genuine curiosity about what's going on, people are just going to go, oh yeah, I'm fine, go away, thank you. In fact, I was reading a book recently, and they were talking about that apparently in Romania, somewhere in Eastern Europe, when it was Soviet, they thought they'd do the system where they could, check out how every department was and ask them. And of course, they all said they were 10 out of 10, because they didn't want anyone coming around to say what's going wrong. And, so you have to set up, I think, what ProSearch have done really well is to set up a supportive environment, for team leaders and for teams, that also is challenging, in the right places, but it's coming from a position of actually want to support you to lead a great team. Would you agree with that? I'm sure you would do, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no doubt it has made us better with our organizational health and our employee relationships and our understanding of employees. And sort of going back to the idea that it was a radical concept, in 2016, prior to the pandemic, and then it became a necessity post-pandemic. And so to have those years already with the tool, to have our employees comfortable with sharing information and understanding how the information was being utilized to improve their work experience, was fantastic. So it was definitely something that, I think of the quote, for those of you who I'm going to sort of butcher the quote a little bit, but you'll get the reference. But if you know the movie Field of Dreams, if you build it, he will come. But we often use the phrase, if you build it, they will come. And that's what we really did with Friday, in that we, introduced it, and then did a lot of different types of efforts to promote it and create awareness of it. And we saw what we hoped we would see: the increase in participation, the transparency with what was being shared in the tool, and then the conversations going back to individuals about what was being shared.
Yeah, and I think it was really important at the beginning and all the way through that your CEO, Julia, has been incredibly not supportive, but champion it, hasn't she, the whole process?
Absolutely. And Julia is our CEO and co-founder of the company, and that has been instrumental in the adoption and ProSearchers embracing Friday. Was the support that we had, not only from the executive team and senior leadership, but specifically from our CEO, who would quite frequently send out a communication about the fun question of the week that is in the survey, sharing what her response was, and she can't wait to, and then sharing that she couldn't wait to see what other pro searchers what their response would be. And sometimes she would even guess, like name somebody and what she thought this person would say. So really, it seems just like a quick sort of note in an email. At the time, it was before Teams, but it was a way of just closing the circle and making it more personal. And it was a way to find out and get to know people a little bit better. So having her, champion it right out the gate, and like quite frequently, then it just became contagious. And then we saw other execs doing it, and then it just, what is it about? Something becoming a habit. It only takes a few weeks, and then then you panic more when you don't do it versus when you do.
Well, I'm just sort of imagining. So Julia is, I mean, she's a very impressive woman, very, very, very smart, and she's got a very dry sense of humor, hasn't she? And it's like, and I, for me as a Brit, she has more of a British sense of humor sometimes, I think, than an American one. And it's like, you have to like double take sometimes. I'm actually really, I didn't know that she used to do that she used to send out the note on it, guessing it, but I can imagine her doing it with just a little twinkle in there.
She would be thrilled to hear that you find her a little more British with her humor. She does have a way. We have a conversation, or we have ways that we sort of talk about Julie. She may not say a lot, but you understand it, and and there is those opportunities to for her to be more personal and share humor in communications, and that is just another way to contribute to organizational health, culture, and of course to happiness.
Yeah. And I think it would be fair to say that it wasn't universal across the executive team that they thought this was a great idea, or that it made them perhaps feel a little exposed, or I don't know how there was work to be done, wasn't there, to get everybody to really buy into it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think again, sort of going back to the adjective I used to describe it. It was radical at that time. It was like, how am I feeling? And you want me to answer this and tell you and answer these questions about work-life balance and appreciation and team relationships and cooperation, et cetera. That's a lot to ask people to just do for the first time, thoroughly honest, and then continue to do it. And so it did take a little bit of time to get the participation percentage where we'd like for it to be that 70% or higher. I think even in the first 6 months, maybe up to the first year, we were probably toggling between like the 50 to 60, high 60% participation rate. And, and now the norm is, it's always in the 70 to 80%, and, fairly frequently above 80%. And sometimes, we get up to 95%. And to think of an organization that's global and time zones and different responsibilities and hybrid, to get 90% of the company to come together to share information, especially quarterly, outstanding.
Yeah. And, right from the beginning. So, I used to sometimes be pre-pandemic. I used to sometimes spend a month on the West Coast, and I would often come down. I think maybe 2 or 3 times I came down to ProSearch to do a talk. I think they were called Frank Talks, weren't they? Or did you still have Frank Talks?
Yeah, there's still Frank Talks.
Yeah. Sort of a bit like TED Talks, but Frank.
Yes.
Being Frank, and and Julia, was always very, very, very supportive of them and wanting people to be engaged and wanting to hear if things weren't going right. So that absolute sort of consistency, of it, and getting the buy-in from the exec team. And I think that's something you continue to work on, hasn't it? Right, post-pandemic as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly, I certainly want to recognize that the C-suite has a lot on their shoulders and what they're doing, and they're working,
totally.
2 years ahead, 3 years ahead, and there's a lot of things competing for their time and attention and energy. So we certainly understand that, but it's really fantastic to see our CEO Julia really commit to this and see the value in it. And then we sort of, we talked about that sort of becomes contagious, and you want to be a part of it. There was something else I also wanted to note about that you said that triggered something I wanted to share. I've lost it, so we can keep going, and I'll share it when it comes back to me.
Yeah. So I was, thinking about that buy-in and whatever like that, but sometimes Friday Pulse can raise sensitive issues, and I sort of, wondered how you've dealt with that, over the years. I don't know if you want to give it, I don't know, speak in code if you need to about a particular thing, but basically, that is what sometimes some people are, scared of, is that things can be a little tricky. And of course, mainly there's good news, but occasionally things come up, don't they?
Yeah, and so going back to, and thank you for that, because that reminded me where the point that I was going to make about our leadership that was a little reluctant to participate in the survey, because you may not hear what you expected to hear. As a company, we didn't hear what we thought we were going to hear right out the gate, but we appreciated it that people were being honest, and it allowed us to take action. So if I'll zero into my department that I was in over for about 5 years. I'm in another department now, but there were team members who didn't necessarily embrace the conversation about Friday Pulse in our weekly team meetings, because it did feel a little more sensitive, and it was a little, I guess the buzzword will be radical. It was sort of a radical concept in a team meeting with your peers as well as leaders. Talking about, hey, how are we feeling? Our score is low this week, and then obviously with the filter tools that Friday Pulse has available to us, we can see by department, we can see by tenure, we can see by location. So, and I will emphasize, and perhaps we'll get into this a little bit later, but just relying on surface results isn't enough. You want to take those deep dives and manipulate the reporting to really find out what is happening within the organization, within a department. So back to us, it was the department that I was a part of at the time. There were those who were passionately against the communication and about the scores. But what was fascinating was that it changed over time, and how quickly it changed over time, with the ritual or the routine of every weekly meeting was going to start with looking at the Friday results. And within a few weeks, those who are perhaps a little more reluctant, leaned in a little bit more to hear what was happening with other teams, maybe appreciated that they weren't alone in some challenges, or they wanted to, do a low-key brag about something they did, and they had a celebration or something they were excited about. So the ritual and the routine of it created a comfort with it, and in turn, trust within the department, the team members, and then just became the catalyst for everything over the years. And scores would increase, and you see specific areas that would increase. So it does take a little bit of work. It takes commitment, but all relationships do. So if you're in it for the long haul, you got to do
That's
those.
very true. All relationships do. Trust takes time to build, and actually I think we all know it's also the problem with trust is it can take a moment to be shattered as well. But when and so to trust a new system, with a slightly radical idea where we're asking you to ask, talk about your feelings, in a very light way, how you felt, but was it good or bad? But it does take time, and I think probably a lot of people are a little skeptical that their experience will be taken seriously, probably from previous employers where they haven't been, treated well, and they bring that with them, and it takes time for people to realize actually this is serious, and you're one of the very best examples of people taking it very consistently and persistently seriously over a long period of time. So yeah, people learn. Yeah.
As you say that, I think I shared this in one of our meetings a couple of weeks ago, that one of the things that we learned with Friday Pulse and the relationship that our employees have with it is, it did take some time. Some people were immediate adopters to it. Others took a little bit longer. Certainly the pandemic sort of had everybody lean into it, embrace it, just because that's how communication was happening. But it is something that when you ask people, what if you worked at a company that didn't care how happy you were, or what your work-life balance was, or if you were feeling appreciated, or if you were learning new things, would you want that? And it's sort of like once you've had something, like, no, don't take it away.
Yeah.
And you want it to be there, because not having it there, I mean, it sounds so, I mean, it just sounds ludicrous now to think like, oh, why would we not
Yeah.
ask about work-life balance and happiness and appreciation, accomplishment, etc. Um, why would you not?
Yeah. Julia once, I don't know if you know this, but she once gave me this great feedback. She said, to give you an idea of what I think about Friday Pulse, she said, we've never once had a conversation about stop using it.
Yeah,
You know, and I hadn't really thought about the fact that obviously clients must sometimes have conversations which she goes, we never even had the conversation. It's not even been a question, you know.
it,
And you know,
it's so true. I mean, it's a thermometer that measures the temperature, or every week, and every week is unique, and so you can never not value it or appreciate it, or utilize it, because it's real-time information that, at least for us, has been critical to the navigation over post-pandemic. It's just been, like I said, we can't imagine not having it.
like, going back to the pandemic itself, when we were talking, last week in preparation for this, uh, you were saying about how quickly you bounce back. So if we go back to March 2020, and I don't know, when did you have the work from home directives in California? Were they end of March? When did they come?
We early adapters to that, and we actually, our last day in the office, ironically, was Friday the 13th in March Friday the 13th. So our first day remote was the 16th, that Monday.
Yeah.
And I think you may be going to continue on, or I don't know if I'm cutting you off.
No, I can hear you. No, no.
Okay. Um, and so it was, we were absolutely, curious, like, how are our ProSearch's, how are employees feeling about this? They're now, and this was at a time when hybrid was scary and unknown, and nothing worked. People hadn't embraced it to the level that they do now. I mean, so much so that we're hybrid forever. But it was a really scary time with the world, and with work, and trying to be able to do your work, and the work still needed to be done. And so we were razor focused on watching Friday results to see what our employees were telling us, because we had steady 70 plus scores prior to that. And the week of our first week at home, we dropped to a 68, just 2 points below that 70 sort of sweet spot that we'd hoped for. And we thought, is this the beginning? That's not that bad of a dip, and let's see how it goes. And we were pleasantly surprised. The next week it rebounded, and we've been there ever since. I think just this week, I send a recap to our executive team every week about the weekly scores, and this past week was 218 consecutive weeks of high employee happiness as an organization. So that, and I've joined some of your seminars where you sort of show the graphs, and I think the impact there in the UK was a little bit different than, and even perhaps in the US, we sort of went against the trend because we rebounded fairly quickly. And I think that was because we already had a tool in place that our employees could provide information about how they were navigating what was, probably, the most, I don't know if it's the most frightening time, but certainly what time that no one knew what the next day was going to bring. And this was something that measured that in detail.
Yeah, I mean, I know, for example, in the UK, if you look at the national average, and then, happiness dropped, if you can say by percentages, but it dropped by about 25%. In our clients, it tended to drop 15%, so much more than you had to drop, and also took 5-6 weeks to recover rather than 2, but the UK altogether about 13-14 weeks. So, and I think about resilience as, how you can bounce back from a setback, and obviously it was a global setback. But you guys did particularly well, and particularly as you had to move, and you're a difficult business, I should think, to move from home with all the security and everything that you have to look after as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was, yeah, it's just a lot of equipment, and a lot of security, and it was not an easy shift. It would be challenging to do it over over a quarter.
Yeah.
But to do it over a weekend, was just, it's crazy.
Yeah.
But it really, I think, as a company, it brought us all closer together. And then certainly, I think because of the pandemic, the weekly survey was a way for ProSearchers to stay connected and look forward to the results every week, to see what somebody's favorite movie was, or what podcast, or what did they watch on Netflix? What do they do? There was this creating that social connection. So, and I think that's an important thing to note, that certainly Friday is providing a lot of tools and information, a lot of information about our organizational health, but it's also impacting our social connection, which is so vital to us at ProSearch. We call ourselves ProSearchers, and no longer in one place. Friday has sort of become, a version of a water cooler. On the day that the survey closes, people go into it. What's the question? Favorite movie? Oh, I love that movie. I love that book. I love that podcast.
Yeah.
Or what are you doing this summer? I mean, it's a way to create as close to an environment like that where everybody can come together and interact.
Yeah.
So, there's lots of ways that Friday is beneficial for us.
That's fabulous and very, very nice to hear. And I just think I'd love you to give us some sort of practical examples about like some actions you took, based on the feedback, or based on well, it doesn't really matter if it's to do with Friday Pulse, but you done intentionally to like improve ProSearch's experience of work over the last couple of 3 years.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so one of the things that why this tool has been so valuable to us is it is taking the temperature every week, and it allows us to see how ProSearch are feeling now. And we don't want to, even if it's good, we don't want to. We love that and we hope for that, but we need to maintain that. And then also, can they feel great? And so, what can we do? And so, we wanted to maintain momentum. So there was definitely, there were promotions, fun promotions, whether it's through signage when we were all in the building, in our break rooms, or through Frank, our corporate communication blog, as you mentioned earlier, doing some just posts, or we've associated our core values into with Friday as well. So we tie that in, and so we can see the relationship and getting people to communicate on those topics and how they relate. It in addition to campaigns, well, one of the first things that we did when I came aboard was started meeting with the executive team quarterly after their culture profile, the extended survey. And, we want to go up to the executive floor, join them for an hour and a half session to share the results. And it was really just a conversation at the table. There were some surprises. It was creating awareness. There were some high fives. There were some things that we were, doing really well. But that was great, but that wasn't going to be just enough to maintain the value and the awareness of what Friday was providing. So how do we improve that? Well, then it became, all right, well, we want to meet periodically with leaders of departments in person, at least with departments for scores, maybe a little surprising, to understand what's happening. So we started doing meetings with those scores that we had some curiosity about. And that was received well. So much so then it was, okay, well, now can you now do that with all leadership? And so again, this is specifically with the culture profile. We now meet with all department leadership, and we share the results and do some analysis and quarter over quarter, get some insight from them, because as org dev, we don't just want to understand what Friday is telling us. We also want to understand what the people who are answering the survey can tell us, and so we can understand that relationship. And so those, just continuing to do more with it. And just in the last couple of weeks, maybe about a month ago, well, let me back up a little bit. One of the things that came out of those conversations with executives is we really need to, going back to, they may not have time to look at the survey. I, as org dev, the manager of org dev, do have some time to have it as a priority to review the results. So I did do an analysis every week and share that with them. And that's evolved where, just overall scores, taking deeper dives, noticing trends, looking at the forest versus the trees. And just in the last few weeks, we're now going to expand that to outside of the executive team, but to what we call our people managers. And so it's a broader awareness of those results, that they see how org dev is looking at it, and then they can look at that, they get a broader awareness, and it sort of closes a circle on the mystery of, well, what are we doing with this data? They see that we're looking at it and taking action with it. It closes that circle. Like, there is value in taking that 2 to 5 minutes every week.
Yeah, because I love that, because you're sort of inspiring people to use it as well as, and it's a very difficult thing. I don't know what advice you've got for other people who manage a Friday Pulse account, but how much do you push people to participate, and how much do you sort of encourage it? Because it's a difficult balance to strike, I would guess.
Well, we definitely, I think over time it became habit. I think that a lot of our employees genuinely look forward to the survey, specifically the fun question of the week. But because we've had this action that comes out of it that they don't see, but they feel it when it comes back to them, they know that their input and their participation, someone's taking a look at that. There is an analysis. They know that org dev is invested in, manages an analysis of that reporting every week. We share it with the executive team. Our executive team, specifically our CEO, will communicate periodically about it. And so they know that their participation is not only needed, but it's valued and appreciated. And then what we do with that information, we, on our Frank blog, we will share results. It is, sort of going back to, sort of if you build it, they will come. It isn't just us. It was a shift in a mindset, particularly with our people managers, that this is a tool that allows you to understand your team more. And you want to take advantage of it, especially if you have a hybrid team, or you're hybrid, or you're remote, or whatever the case may be. This is something that, in the intensity of what a day-to-day looks like now for everybody, I feel like that's a growing trend. You may not have an opportunity to get to these types of questions or this type of understanding within your team meetings or quarterly meetings or whatever, however you meet. But this is a resource that is just happening automatically in the background. People are just giving you this information. As a people manager, taking the time, on Monday after the survey closes, to take a look at how your team is feeling, see if it aligns with what you thought they would be feeling. And I think it's also important too to look at how, I think I may have shared with you an example, or I can share that we have a team here that the quarterly culture profile results they're high in so many of the categories. It's fantastic to see. But weekly, their scores, maybe their happiness score each week is a little lower, and sometimes really low. And that could just be the nature of what's happening with work at that time. And I think you're going to see the peaks and valleys. But it is an interesting thing to look at, to see, can employees, have a fantastic week or a tough week, and are able to separate that from the broader quarterly culture profile, and take a breath to answer those questions honestly. And that you may have contrast, because when people sit back and look at forests, they're feeling this, but in the day-to-day, they feel this. And sometimes that's an alignment, sometimes a little bit different. And a way to understand that is.
Yeah, so Roy's just frozen there, but is your audio still going? I don't know. We had a problem before. But can you still hear me, Angela? Fine. As in, it's
I
not
can
me.
still hear you, yes.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
yeah,
okay.
I've lost Roy, sadly.
So we lost Roy. So
I think he's back.
I think he's coming back, but I'll just finish my point, Roy, which was that sometimes the day-to-day experience, the weekly experience, is about what I call friction and flow, which is that, what's really flowing and going well, and what's holding you back. And they can be very frustrations can be very specific about, they could be about IT, like we just had with the freezing. They can be about, they can be about, a personality clash or something like that, or resource not available, or perhaps losing a job you wanted to win, or something like that going wrong with a client. And that can be different than the culture, which can be about, how much you're supported in that and whatever like that. So we do sometimes see some differences. They normally align, and but we definitely do see some differences. But one of the things, the scores that I've always been very impressed that ProSearch has improved so much. In fact, there's two or three which I think they've done really, really well with. But one, it's a very, very simple question, which is, do you feel appreciated at work? And it wasn't a low score to begin with, but you've really bumped that up over the years. And another one you've really bumped up is about getting helpful feedback, being able to influence decisions. So there's some scores there which have really, really moved, persistently. Actually, you've always had really good team relationships. You always had quite a good sense of pride in the organization. So you had these really strong things to build from. But you can see in the data very, very clearly that people feel more appreciated, they feel more involved, and they feel they get more helpful feedback. Those are really good things.
Yeah, and in full transparency, those were some of the areas that when we first, adopted the survey, that we were like, hey, that's a little bit lower than we were expecting. It wasn't horrible, to your point, but it also wasn't, really, really high. And so we took action. And one of the things that we did is we established monthly check-ins between managers and direct reports. HR would own that, and they would provide a couple of questions to get the conversation started. Because to the point we made earlier, not everybody is comfortable with a conversation about non-work topics, or getting into your showing vulnerability, or talking about organizational health, et cetera. So prompting them with these questions to start a conversation hopefully would lead to a broader conversation about how the employee is feeling. Really, it's a time for not the manager's time with the employee, but the employee's time with the manager. That was the idea of the check-in. And then we've always been big promoters of appreciation. We have another tool that we utilize. It's fairly similar to what it's our performance management system. It's owned by HR, but it does have a shout out element, very similar to the celebrations feature in Friday. And we have a long history with that, and really encouraging recognition and public recognition. It was important when we were all in one building, even more important when we were spread across the world, to know what other really incredible things other teams and individuals are doing. So doing periodic campaigns around shout outs, whether it's holiday themed or just for whatever reason, just to do something kind of fun, promoting the opportunity to show appreciation. And again, that certainly creates awareness by all pro searchers of the cool things that are happening in departments and teams that they wouldn't necessarily have visibility to.
Yeah, because you can see it in the data. I mean, another one score that you've improved over the years, and particularly when you move from in one location to hybrid, is team cooperation, how teams work well together. That score's gone up significantly over the years, and not from a terribly low start, but to a really strong score actually. And it's very, very important for productivity that teams are cooperating and supporting each other. But perhaps you could tell people a little bit about moving to hybrid. How have you ensured that? I mean, do you have people from Hyderabad come over sometimes in Ireland? Do people, I'm sure not everybody comes across, but do you mix people and help that happen? Yeah.
We do if there's a purpose for it. But we didn't want to rely on that, because we wouldn't always have that opportunity to do that consistently and with everybody. I mean, it's pricey to bring 5 people across the world, put them in hotels. LA is not a very cheap place to live in, let alone stay for a week in a hotel that's somewhat decent. So we didn't want to rely on that. We knew that if we were going to make hybrid work, we needed to work in a hybrid environment successfully and learn from it. And so, to your point, it was a lot of stop starts and a little confusion and perhaps anxiety at the beginning. again, I think we can all remember when we first went hybrid, in Q1 of 2020, nobody really loved it because it was inconvenient. We didn't have everything, the big monitors and all the setup and just all the things that we'd become accustomed to. But over time, we understood how to make it work, and that works how to work.
Yeah, I think we just lost Roy again there, which is a little annoying.
We started to work
But
more efficient. And
I think we lost you again, Roy. Sorry.
yeah,
But yeah, don't worry about it.
I
We
can hear you.
yeah.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting to seeing how intentionally you did that, and it's really great. So perhaps you could just say, so in the last sort of 5-10 minutes, and then people please feel free to ask Roy a question if you want to put it in the chat. I'm sorry, I've been so engaged with Roy. I so like speaking with him. I've sort of kind of forgotten to ask you guys how you're feeling, so I apologize about that. But Roy, perhaps you could say what you're working on, because what I really love is that you've been using Friday Pulse 7-8 years, and you've still got all these new ways that you're working with it and new ways of committing. I'd love you just to say some of the things you're excited about working with it about now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, certainly, as I mentioned earlier, we definitely want to expand the conversations about Friday results to all managers across the organization. We also want to take advantage of the advancements that you have done or the improvements that you've provided in your tool. We are heavily, we live in Teams. We live in Microsoft Teams. And so go to where people are at. So we're excited about, incorporating or bringing into the Friday bot into MS Teams. So get people right where they're working. So I think that's going to lead to even higher participation for us and awareness. So looking forward to that. And again, it's continuing the conversation, at every level. It's asking our people managers in your weekly meetings, talk about the results, commit to it. It's getting our senior leadership to ask questions about it. It's start talking to individuals and doing a bottom-up sort of organic curiosity and promoting the value of ProSearch, of Friday Pulse, and why they want to take the time to take these surveys.
Yeah, fantastic. So if you were to give 3 bits of advice to an organization starting to use Friday Pulse, perhaps you could do that. If we haven't lost you altogether, I don't know if we've lost you altogether.
No. I think the camera may have been causing some issues. So I'm hoping that audio seems to be seamless. So I wouldn't have to route. But could you repeat that question?
Yeah, so I'm just thinking, so if someone's about to start using Friday Pulse, what would be your sort of top 3 tips to them, for using it? And then we'll see if there are any questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I certainly, you want to share the why. Why are you introducing this tool and bringing it to your organization? That's going to be important, I think, for anybody to have buy-in and to understand its value. You want to share the why. And then you want to have transparency with the results. And by that, I don't necessarily mean, if you have a particular team who has low scores, everybody needs to know that. It is sort of a vertical transparency that everybody knows that what each team is experiencing, having conversations about that. And there may be some training that's even involved in that to help people managers. A lot of times people, management positions are elevated because of their skills with tools and processes, and perhaps not necessarily with people management or with organizational health. And so taking time to educate them and inspire them to embrace these areas just as much as they do, what's a deliverable, because you can't deliver wow to your customer or your client if you have a team that's not feeling positive about the workday, the work week, their contributions, etc. So it's a commitment, but I think we said earlier that anything that's worthwhile requires a commitment.
Absolutely. So, I mean, actually, this is, partly a question from someone, but, how much of your sort of time do you spend in a week thinking about Friday Pulse? 10%, 20% of your time, 5%? I don't know.
I never stop thinking about Friday Pulse. I mean, certainly, the routines of the week that, are on Mondays right after the survey closes, I spend an hour or two looking at results, doing an analysis and sharing that with our executive team and publishing that out to them. Periodically throughout the week, I'll get some inquiries about adding some of the filters that Friday has to get a better understanding. And then, what can org dev do to help navigate through whatever that experience is that they may be having, or how can we amplify the celebration because there's some really cool things happening within a team. The culture profile that comes out quarterly, again, just extensive time spent on that. I'd probably spend, probably a week looking at that, well, not full week, but few hours over in a week to look at that, because that's such valuable information. And there's just so many ways to slice that information up to really find really fascinating stories. And again, whether it's an indication of, hey, we need to give some attention to this, or recognize the success and find out more. How did you guys navigate this? Or what cool things did you guys do that you guys are having a score of 100 or 95 for the week when the previous week you were at a 72? What contributed to that? So keeping the conversation going, as org dev, we're responsible for organizational health. And so this is, as I mentioned earlier, the thermometer that is the first check to see the health of our ProSearchers. So just wrapping around your arms around it, being curious. And you guys have also been great about when we were like, oh, it'd be cool if you guys could do this. And you guys have some of the things that you guys have rolled out. So it's fantastic to see how the tool has improved. I shouldn't say improved, just it continues to get better and better, creating more value for us.
Thank you. I mean, I liked what you were saying about, challenging people to ask them to imagine what is a good week for them. What would be a score 4 or 5, that's, and getting them to think, well, that's what a good week. Look, how can I work towards that? That sounds a really good idea that you were working with the teams. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you and I, when we spoke a few weeks back, and I think, Angela, you and I may have talked about this as well, but, is okay, and it is, but if the scores are in that range for an extended period of time and they're not really ever going into good or great, there should be some curiosity about that. And the tool will provide a little bit of understanding of what may be contributing to that score. But again, it's a thermometer. You have to have conversation. You have to get the direct managers and the team to participate in conversations to understand that. Because while okay is okay, there should be some really hopefully stellar moments. I mean, knowing what we do as a company, all of our teams should be high-fiving or doing virtual high fives, multiple times throughout a week or throughout a month. And so we hope to see that in scores as well, that they're celebrating their achievements and their milestones.
Right. And here's a question for you. Like, how do you approach team leaders who are a bit more skeptical about it to sort of help them engage?
Well, I think there's a couple things. One is you want to have a conversation, understand what that is rooted in. And that may be a conversation they can have with organization development, or maybe a conversation they need to have with HR, or it could be a conversation they need to have just with their director to understand what is that resistance, what's it rooted in. And then once you understand that, then you can sort of tackle the issue. And
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. And one last question. Do you see differences across the countries, like different cultures, about how they respond or how they engage with Friday Pulse, or how their culture is actually?
yeah, absolutely. I think we have offices in Ireland, India, and then of course in LA, and we have ProSearch's all over the world. But we definitely see cultural differences, and it's our India team scores really, really high. And I think that is just a culture difference versus the US, where we're very open to sharing, frustrations or celebrations or doing humble brags or not so humble brags. And so we're more open in the US. And I hate to generalize, but we do see that. And, and I think with Ireland, and I think you can certainly speak to this based on your location, that there's more sensitivity just with privacy and things like that. So you have different things that sort of contribute to the embracing of the initiative, of the tool, whether it's it's an invasion of privacy, but you work through that and you understand that it is anonymous and this is for your best interest, because it's how we make the experience better for you. Understand that if your team is scoring 100 every week after week for years, there's probably something there that if you had a conversation, you might get a little texture in that. And then US, you never know what you're going to hear. But what you want to do is make sure that you're looking at that. And high scores are great. That you could argue that perhaps is the goal, but it's not the reality, because we're asking people how they feel at work. And so there's going to be texture. What we're really looking for is that people aren't living for extended periods of time in just these low score ranges, because that's not a great feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And another question here, do you do anything specific to like encourage sort of peer-to-peer support, like, team leader to team leader, without coming through another route? I suppose that's what it means. Yeah. But support from one team to another.
Yeah. We have a couple things. Sort of stepping outside of Friday, we definitely have a leadership development initiative where we bring our leaders together to not only talk about, client or customer specific initiatives or goals, but also to talk about, what we used to call soft skills that we now call core skills, and coaching them, because as I shared earlier, not everybody can be, a member of our finance team could be a wizard in Excel, but, don't have a lot of experience in managing people or expressing vulnerability or demonstrating or expressing vulnerability. So you want to help them. So we want to have these workshops or leadership workshops to develop those people management skills.
Yeah, I really like you calling them core skills. I've been looking for a word for that, because I've been using essential skills, but I think I prefer core. Can I borrow that, please?
Absolutely. Julius is the first person I heard say it. So taking it full circle.
Okay. Yeah, I might, because I'm well, you as you know, and some other people might know, I'm writing a book at the moment, and I've got a bit about that from soft skills to essential, but I think core's better.
Yeah.
I'm going to grab that. Roy, we're sort of up against time now, but I'd really like to thank you for your participation today. I really, really appreciate it. Really appreciate talking to you and learning from you. And yeah, for all your commitment to ProSearch's happiness and because a huge part of its success is down to your persistence and consistency with it over the years. So thank you very much indeed for that.
Well, thank you for letting me be a part of it and to share our story. And as I think I shared it at the top of the call, Friday was very valuable. Friday Pulse was very valuable to us, in 2016, 2017, when we started with it. And each year has just become more valuable to us. It's helped us navigate through the pandemic and post-pandemic and into our hybrid era. And it's just something that, like I said, I can't imagine that we could not have it now, because it would just seem ludicrous to not have a tool and not have a commitment to measuring how our employees are feeling every week. So it's been a fantastic 8 years, and here's to 8 more.
Yeah, let's do that. Thank you very much, sir. Have a good rest of your day. I know it's still early morning for you, and thank you everyone for joining us. And we'll let you know what our next webinar is next time. So have a good rest of your day, everybody. Thanks very much indeed. Bye,
Thank
Roy.
you.